How did Jack survive a plane crash in the middle of the ocean, only to end up trapped in an underwater city filled with drug-addicted mutants, giant diving suit monsters, and scary little girls?
Wait a minute. He's still breathing. It's alright. I know he'll be an angel soon.
That's right, peeps. Today we're covering the entire story of the BioShock universe, starting from the fall of Rapture all the way to the infinite realities of Columbia. Make sure y'all got your oxygen tanks, because we're about to dive straight to the bottom of the ocean. The first BioShock game came out in 2007, directed by gaming legend Ken Levine. The story starts in the year 1960 with a man named Jack sitting on a plane flying over the Atlantic Ocean. He's smoking a cigarette, it was a different time, and staring at a family photograph while holding a small gift from his parents. Then suddenly the plane crashes straight into the ocean, tearing the aircraft in half and killing everyone on board. Except for him, of course. He somehow manages to survive the crash and swims through the burning wreckage. That's when he notices a mysterious lighthouse nearby. With no other options, Jack swims toward it and enters the building. Inside, he discovers giant statues and banners introducing a man named Andrew Ryan alongside the phrase, "No gods or kings, only man." At the center of this lighthouse here, he finds a strange underwater transport vehicle known as a bathysphere. As Jack steps inside, it begins descending into the depths of the ocean. The lights suddenly dim and a recording from Andrew Ryan starts playing. Through the speakers, Ryan explains his belief that scientists, artists, and great minds should exist free from government's religion and societal control.
I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose Rapture.
As the bathysphere descends deeper, the city of Rapture slowly comes into view. Massive skyscrapers stretch across the ocean floor, surrounded by glowing neon lights, giant glass tunnels, and towering Art Deco buildings, while a giant fish casually swims past the windows like they're on their morning walk. At first glance, Rapture looks beautiful, almost unreal. But the deeper Jack descends, the more unsettling the city begins to feel. The lights flicker, parts of the buildings are damaged, and the city just totally looks abandoned, almost like a paradise that collapsed a long time ago. During the descent, a deranged, zombie-like figure suddenly slams itself against the bathysphere window before disappearing back into the darkness.
Is it someone new?
Seriously, if I was Jack, I would have accepted my fate right then and there and returned to the ocean ASAP to die in peace. Moments later, Jack finally arrives inside Rapture, and that's when it becomes crystal clear that something has gone terribly wrong here. Before he can even process what's happening, he's contacted over the radio by a man named Atlas, who becomes his only guide throughout the city.
Would you kindly pick up that shortwave radio?
Atlas explains that Rapture has completely fallen apart, and if Jack wants any chance of surviving, he needs to keep moving. As Jack makes his way deeper into the city, he starts encountering things that make no sense at all. The first of these are splicers. These were once ordinary citizens, but now they're violent, unstable lunatics who completely lost their marbles after getting addicted to a substance called Adam, which basically allowed people to rewrite their own DNA and gain superhuman abilities through injectable serums known as plasmids. At one point, after Jack barely survives an attack from a splicer, Atlas tells him that normal weapons won't be enough to survive here. He directs Jack toward a plasmid called Electrobolt, which is basically the first atom-powered ability in the game. Jack injects himself with it and immediately collapses to the floor screaming while his hand starts crackling with electricity. Congratulations, brother. You've been in Rapture for about 6 minutes and you already started turning yourself into a splicer. And if all this wasn't disturbing enough, Jack soon witnesses one of the most horrifying sights in the entire game. He watches a small girl known as a little sister crawling towards a dead body and extracting glowing Adam from the corpse using a giant syringe, all while calling the body an angel. Meanwhile, standing beside her is a being known as Big Daddy. The girls, however, lovingly call them Mr. Bubbles, but don't let the cute nickname fool you. Because these giant diving suit monsters are armed with massive drills and they exist for one reason and one reason only: to protect their little sister at all costs. After surviving his first encounters with the splicers and gaining the Electrobolt plasmid, Jack continues pushing deeper into Rapture under Atlas's guidance. Atlas explains that his wife and son are trapped somewhere in Neptune's Bounty, a once thriving fishing district that's now crawling with splicers. The city's collapse has cut him off from them, so desperate to save his family, he begs Jack for help.
But you're the only hope I'll ever see my wife and child again. Go to Neptune's Bounty. Find my family, please.
As Jack continues to make his way through the ruins, Atlas begins telling him more about Rapture and how the city ended up in its current state. He explains that Ryan originally created Rapture as a utopia for scientists, artists, and businessmen who wanted to escape the rules of the surface world, and for a while the city actually thrived, but everything changed once Adam and plasmids became popular. The more people modified themselves, the more unstable the city became. Addiction spread everywhere, crime increased, and eventually Rapture descended into utter chaos. At the same time, Ryan himself became more paranoid and controlling. Security cameras, armed drones, automated turrets, the entire city slowly transformed into a giant surveillance state designed to eliminate anyone Ryan considered a threat. And because Ryan practically has eyes everywhere in Rapture, it doesn't take him long to notice Jack and contact him immediately. Ryan assumes Jack was sent by the surface world and demands to know who he's working for.
So tell me, friend, which one of the bitches sent to you? The KGB wolf or the CIA jackal?
Yeah, not exactly the warm welcome you'd expect from the founder of the city. Unfortunately for Jack, Ryan wasn't the only person in Rapture losing his mind. As Jack travels through the medical pavilion, he comes across Dr. Steinman, who used to be one of Rapture's most brilliant surgeons. Keyword used to be. Well, keywords, I guess. But after using Adam for years, Steinman completely lost his mind and became obsessed with creating perfect beauty. Except his version of perfect beauty is basically mutilating his patients and murdering them if he believes they turned out to be imperfect or ugly.
He's ugly! 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 Ugly!
Eventually, Jack takes Steinman down, finally escaping the medical pavilion alive. But one thing has become painfully obvious at this point: this city is filled with crazy bums like Steinman. Anyway, while Jack is busy trying not to get murdered every 5 minutes, Atlas reveals more about the conflict that actually destroyed Rapture. According to him, one of Andrew Ryan's biggest rivals was a powerful smuggler and businessman named Frank Fontaine. Fontaine secretly built influence among the poor citizens of Rapture by supplying illegal goods and sold Adam on the black market to anyone willing to pay up. Not only that, but he also helped people survive Ryan's increasingly strict control in the city, and over time, Fontaine became powerful enough to directly challenge Ryan himself. Eventually, tensions between the two exploded into a violent civil war that tore Rapture apart from the inside. Atlas claims Fontaine eventually died during their conflict, but the damage had already been done. Rapture had fallen, and the city he's witnessing in the moment is the aftermath of it all. Meanwhile, Jack continues adapting to life inside Rapture by using more plasmids and fighting through increasingly dangerous splicers. During this journey, he comes across a scientist named Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum, the woman responsible for helping create the Little Sisters in the first place. However, unlike most people in Rapture, she deeply regrets it. She explains the Little Sisters were once ordinary orphan girls who were genetically modified to gather and recycle Adam with a special syringe from dead bodies throughout the city. The Big Daddies were made to protect them from splicers. Atlas encourages Jack to harvest the Little Sisters whenever possible, which basically means to kill them so he can extract all the Adam from their bodies and become stronger. But Tenenbaum desperately begs Jack not to kill them. Instead, she gives him a way to save the Little Sisters while still receiving some Adam in return. This becomes one of the biggest moral choices for the player in the game. Harvest the girls for maximum power, or rescue them and preserve what little humanity still remains inside Rapture.
No! 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 Thank you.
Depending on what choice the player makes from this point onward, the ending of the game changes completely. And as my conscience is still holding on for dear life, we're going to be saving the Little Sisters today. Moving on, Atlas continues guiding Jack towards Neptune's bounty, where his wife and son are supposedly hiding in a submarine. According to Atlas, they're trapped near Fontaine fisheries and need to be rescued before it's too late, but getting there is of course not going to be easy. Standing in Jack's way is Peach Wilkins, another Adam-fried maniac who used to work as one of Frank Fontaine's smugglers and now controls the route leading to the fisheries. Since large sections of Rapture have been sealed off by Andrew Ryan, Jack needs Wilkins' help to access the area and move forward. But Wilkins refuses to let him in unless he retrieves photographs of dangerous spider slicers using a research camera. After completing the task and returning with the photos, Peach betrays Jack and traps him inside the freezer room while sending in splicers to kill him. Thankfully, Jack manages to escape, hunts Peach down, and finally makes his way towards the submarine. Atlas asks him to use the control panel to open the entrance to the submarine bay and let him in. But as Jack gets closer, Andrew Ryan contacts him over the radio and warns Jack not to continue if he wants to avoid the consequences of becoming his enemy. Suddenly, the lights inside the fisheries cut out and waves of splicers begin attacking Jack from every direction, as Ryan keeps demanding to know who Jack really is and why he's in Rapture in the first place. Given all the chaos, Atlas urges Jack to just get his family out and leave the place ASAP. He'll regroup with them later. So Jack makes his way towards the sub, and right then, Andrew Ryan blows it up right in front of his eyes. Atlas completely breaks down after witnessing the death of his wife and son, and from that moment onward, the mission becomes personal. Now, Jack isn't just trying to survive in Rapture, he's helping Atlas hunt down Andrew Ryan himself. Burning with anger, Atlas swears revenge against Andrew Ryan as he guides Jack towards Ryan's inner districts. When Jack arrives in Arcadia, he comes across Julie Langford, the botanist responsible for maintaining the underwater forests that produce oxygen for the entire city. Once Ryan realizes Jack is getting closer to him, he poisons Arcadia's forests in an attempt to stop him. Julie contacts Jack through the radio and guides him towards the farmer's market to gather the ingredients needed to create a chemical cure called the Lazarus Vector. But Ryan seals Julie inside her office and floods the room with poisonous gas, killing her for helping Jack. Thankfully, Julie had already explained the rest of the process before she died. Following her instructions, Jack gathers the remaining ingredients, creates the Lazarus Vector, and restores Arcadia's dying forests, and once again continues his journey towards Ryan's office. Eventually, Jack reaches one of the most iconic areas in the entire game, Fort Frolic. Here he encounters Sander Cohen, a famous artist and composer who completely lost his marbles after years of Adam abuse. Now, unlike most splicers who attack Jack immediately, Cohen is weirdly calm, which somehow makes him even more terrifying. And I was gonna say a mad artist's scarier than a mad scientist, but not where I come from. Cohen sees murder as art and forces Jack to participate in one of his masterpieces by hunting down and photographing his former students across Fort Frolic. Since Jack don't really have a choice, he does exactly that. He tracks down Cohen's former students one by one, who have all gone completely insane by this point. He then kills them, takes photographs of their corpses, and displays the pictures as part of Cohen's latest artistic masterpiece. After the final photograph is placed on display, Cohen is finally satisfied with his work and rewards Jack by opening the path forward. Now with Fort Frolic behind him, there's only one thing left for Jack to do.
Now would you kindly head to Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch? It's time to finish this.
After escaping Fort Frolic, Jack finally begins approaching Andrew Ryan's heavily guarded inner districts, but the closer he gets to Ryan, the stranger Ryan starts acting. Instead of threatening Jack, Ryan keeps asking him strange questions about choice, free will, and whether Jack is making his own decisions or simply following orders. He then delivers an absolute banger of a line before calmly activating the self-destruct sequence and turning the entire city into a ticking time bomb.
A season for all things. A time to live and a time to die. A time to build and a time to destroy!
Jack hurries towards Ryan's chamber to stop the destruction in time, but just outside the office, Jack comes across a strange view. He also finds audio recordings left by Dr. Yi Su-chong, one of Rapture's leading scientists. Su-chong reveals that he had been conducting experiments involving psychological conditioning and mind control. Well, that's pleasant. His absolute wholesome goal was to create individuals who could be programmed from birth to obey specific commands without question. Okay, so robots then, right? Am I crazy? Like, why waste the time with humans? Just build robots. What? Well, according to him, these subjects could live completely normal lives while carrying hidden instructions deep within their psyches. All they needed to hear was a specific trigger phrase like, "Would you kindly?" Does that ring a bell for y'all? Because if you've been paying attention throughout the story, you probably heard that phrase more than a few times already, but if you haven't, you'll catch up in just a minute. Jack finally enters Andrew Ryan's office, expecting one final showdown with the man responsible for Rapture's collapse. Instead, he finds Ryan calmly practicing his golf swing. It's not bad, actually. And then he finally starts talking. Or rather, dropping truth bombs. Starting with the biggest one, Jack was never some random plane crash survivor who accidentally discovered Rapture. Instead, he was born inside Rapture only a few years ago and genetically modified to age rapidly. Even crazier, Jack is actually Ryan's illegitimate son with Jasmine Jolene, a dancer Ryan once had a relationship with. After running into some financial troubles, Jolene sold Jack's embryo to Dr. Tenenbaum, who at the time was working alongside Frank Fontaine. Fontaine then used genetic modifications and psychological conditioning to turn Jack into the perfect sleeper agent designed specifically to assassinate Andrew Ryan. All he had to do was throw in a "would you kindly," exactly like Atlas had been doing all this time.
Would you kindly? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly head to Ryan's Ryan's office and kill the son of a...
Holy frick. This means Atlas had been controlling Jack this whole time. That's what Brother was spouting about free will. Even the plane crash that started the entire game wasn't an accident at all. That small gift box we see Jack holding on the plane contained a gun, and after reading the trigger phrase written on the note, he unknowingly used it to shoot the pilot and bring the aircraft down into the ocean. After this huge reveal, Ryan delivers his most iconic line.
A man chooses. A slave obeys.
And to prove his point, Ryan hands Jack a golf club and orders him to kill. Jack tries to resist, but he can't. Over and over again, Jack swings the golf club into Ryan's head, while Ryan continues repeating, a man chooses, a slave obeys.
Obey!
And just like that, Andrew Ryan dies on his own terms, not as a king or a god, but as a man making his final choice. So the shock in BioShock basically stands for this shock, because I'm actually shocked. Dap me up for that. I'll do it myself. But the nightmare isn't over quite yet. Immediately after Ryan's death, Atlas uses the trigger phrase one more time and orders Jack to take Ryan's genetic key and activate a machine hidden inside the office. Once the key is inserted, Atlas finally drops the act and reveals his true identity.
There ain't no Atlas, kid. Never was. The name's Frank Fontaine.
He was Frank Fontaine the whole time. The Irish accent, the helpful guide, the tragic story about his wife and son, all of it was fake. As Fontaine reveals the truth, the machine in Ryan's office begins to change. Andrew Ryan's image disappears and is replaced by Frank Fontaine, symbolizing that control of Rapture has officially changed hands. You see, many of Rapture's most important systems were tied directly to Andrew Ryan's genetic code. It's the reason Ryan could lock people out of entire sections of the city, and why Jack was able to use Ryan's private bathyspheres and access areas that should have been restricted. Since Jack is Ryan's biological son, his DNA was close enough to bypass many of those genetic locks. By using Ryan's genetic key, Fontaine effectively hijacks Ryan's authority and takes control of the city's security network for himself. And that's when the full scope of the plan finally becomes clear. Years earlier, Fontaine faked his own death to disappear from Ryan's radar while secretly creating the Atlas persona to manipulate both Rapture and Jack from the shadows. He had already ordered Su Chong to condition his ace in the hole, aka Jack. Every step Jack took throughout the game had been carefully orchestrated by Fontaine from the very beginning. And now that Ryan is finally dead, Fontaine no longer needs to pretend to be Atlas. He activates Rapture's security systems, unleashes the city against Jack, and leaves him trapped inside the chamber to die. Thanks to the Little Sisters, Jack manages to escape Ryan's office, but after everything he's been through, he collapses and loses consciousness before making it very far. When he finally wakes up, he finds himself inside one of Dr. Tenenbaum's hidden safe houses. Tenenbaum reveals that Fontaine's control over Jack goes far beyond a single phrase. "Would you kindly" was only one of several psychological commands implanted into Jack's mind through harsh conditioning. As long as those commands remain, Fontaine can still control him, so Tenenbaum comes up with a plan. She tells Jack that Dr. Su Chong once developed a secret antidote called Lot 192, a substance capable of breaking Fontaine's psychological conditioning. If Jack can find it, he might finally be free. Unfortunately, Fontaine finds out what Jack is trying to do and begins activating other commands hidden inside his mind. At one point, Fontaine triggers a command called Code Yellow, causing Jack's heart to suddenly stop beating. Jack tries his best to resist these commands and makes his way towards the cure with Tenenbaum's help. Along the way, he's forced to revisit several areas of Rapture again and gather the materials needed to complete the treatment. This journey eventually brings him back to Fort Frolic and, unfortunately, back to Sander Cohen, the only crazy bum Jack did not kill. Now, if there's one thing you should never do around a crazy artist is interrupt their performance, but unfortunately that's exactly what happens. Jack accidentally disrupts one of Cohen's dance performances, sending the already unstable artist into an absolute fracking rage. Eventually, Jack kills Cohen, but then, for reasons known only to his completely broken brain, he carefully poses Cohen's dead body and proceeds to take a photograph of it. After a long and painful journey, Jack finally reaches Su Chong's lab, obtains Lot 192, and successfully removes Fontaine's remaining conditioning, breaking free from his control once and for all. Now using his free will, he chooses his own objective this time: find Frank Fontaine and kill them. The only problem is that Fontaine has locked himself inside a heavily secured research facility where Little Sisters and Big Daddies were originally created. The entrance is protected by genetic locks and security systems that only a Little Sister can help bypass. Unfortunately, Little Sisters don't trust normal people, they only trust Big Daddies. So Tenenbaum comes up with a very weird plan. She has Jack undergo a series of modifications to make him resemble a Big Daddy. He has to wear a modified Big Daddy diving suit, alter his scent using pheromones, and modify his voice so it sounds like a Big Daddy's whale-like groans. Once the transformation is finally complete, a Little Sister accepts him as her protector and guides him through the locks and security systems protecting Fontaine's hideout. At long last, Jack has reached the man responsible for everything he's been through. But cornered and desperate, Fontaine injects himself with a massive amount of Adam in an attempt to become unstoppable. As expected, the result is quite horrifying. Fontaine mutates into a giant glowing monster overflowing with plasmid powers. During the fight, Jack uses a massive syringe to extract Adam from Fontaine's body. As Fontaine grows weaker, the Little Sisters also swarm him and help drain the remaining Adam from his system. After a long battle, Jack is finally able to defeat Fontaine, bringing an end to the war and manipulation that destroyed Rapture. But by this point, the city itself is already beyond saving. Now, as far for the ending of the game, it depends entirely on how you treated the Little Sisters. Of course, as we talked about earlier, if Jack chose to save them, he escapes Rapture alongside the girls and raises them as his own family on the surface. Years later, the Little Sisters remain beside him during his final moments as an old man, showing that despite all the horrors of Rapture, Jack still managed to hold on to his humanity. But if the player harvests the Little Sisters for Adam throughout the game, Jack takes control of Rapture for himself and becomes just as power-hungry as the people who destroyed the city. The ending shows his splicers hijacking a submarine carrying nuclear weapons, strongly implying that Jack plans to bring Rapture's tech and Adam to the surface world. In other words, instead of breaking the cycle of greed and corruption, Jack becomes the very thing his father feared most. And there's actually a third, lesser-known ending in BioShock. It's when the player chooses to save some Little Sisters while harvesting others. The overall ending remains largely the same as the bad ending. Jack still takes control of Rapture and eventually brings its horrors to the surface world. The biggest difference is Dr. Tenenbaum's narration. Unlike the bad ending, where her voice is filled with anger and disgust, the mixed ending sounds sad and disappointed. Tenenbaum acknowledges that Jack showed moments of kindness by saving some of the girls, but she also mourns the fact that he sacrificed others for power. And with that, the incredible story of BioShock finally comes to an end. A little while after the release of BioShock, the developers dropped a small DLC called BioShock Challenge Rooms. It was basically a collection of extra combat and puzzle scenarios designed for players who just wanted more excuses to mess around with BioShock's gameplay mechanics. The DLC throws players into different challenge maps so they have to creatively use plasmids, weapons, hacking, traps, and the environment itself to survive or complete objectives. Some challenges focus on fighting splicers and Big Daddies, while others are more puzzle-oriented and force players to think strategically. There's a tiny bit of lore hidden around the maps, but nothing massively important to the main story. It was mostly just a fun side addition for fans before the series eventually returned with the next major chapter, BioShock 2. Released in 2010, BioShock 2 begins in 1958, 2 years before Jack ever stepped foot into Rapture. This time, however, we're playing as a Big Daddy, more specifically, an Alpha Series Big Daddy named Subject Delta, who's bonded to a little sister named Eleanor Lamb. The story begins with Delta escorting Eleanor as she gathers Adam from corpses around Rapture.
More angels, Daddy! This way!
Eleanor runs into a nearby party where she's attacked by a group of splicers looking to get more Adam. Delta rushes to save her, but one of them hits Delta with a hypnotized plasmid that temporarily allows its user to control another person's mind, and that's when Eleanor's mother, Dr. Sophia Lamb, enters the scene. With Delta now completely under her control thanks to the plasmid, she orders him to kneel, take off his helmet, and shoot himself in the head. Unable to resist, Delta obeys her command, killing himself as the little girl watches in horror. Fast forward to 10 years later, Delta wakes up somewhere inside Rapture, which is in even worse shape than before. As Delta struggles to understand what is happening, he sees a brief glimpse of Eleanor, which disappears before he can make sense of it. As he makes his way out, a little sister approaches him. She tells Delta that he has been sleeping for a long time and urges him to find Eleanor. Before she could say more, a big sister suddenly appears and snatches the girl away. Basically, big sisters are former little sisters who grew up while still carrying years of Adam inside their bodies. As a result, they became faster, stronger, and significantly more terrifying. Moving on, whenever Delta comes close to a little sister, there's a good chance a big sister will eventually show up looking for revenge, and trust me, these girls do not play around. Delta tries to chase after her, but she escapes before he can catch up. Soon after, Delta receives a radio message from a familiar voice, Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum. She explains that she knows who Delta is and asks him to meet her at the Atlantic Express train station, and just like that, our journey begins. As Delta makes his way toward the train station, he begins learning what happened during the years he was gone. After Jack killed Andrew Ryan and Frank Fontaine, Rapture continued falling into ruin. With both of them gone, Dr. Sophia Lamb, a psychiatrist who had long been one of Ryan's biggest rivals, rose to power and took control of what was left of the city. Ryan even had her imprisoned years earlier because of her growing influence over Rapture's citizens, but she still managed to gather a huge following known as the Rapture family, and unlike Ryan, who believed people should pursue their own self-interests, Lamb believed everyone should sacrifice their individuality for the good of the group, which sounds nice in theory, but in practice, the woman is basically running a cult. Anyway, when Delta reaches the train station, Lamb finds him. She reminds him of how she made him shoot himself 10 years ago.
10 years, Subject Delta, since I watched you put a gun to your head and pull the trigger.
She tells him to surrender to her forces, who now surround Delta as they speak. Delta manages to escape from there as Dr. Tenenbaum guides him over the radio. She also reveals that since Alpha Series Big Daddies were permanently bonded to a specific little sister, being separated from Eleanor for far too long will eventually cause Delta to fall into a coma and die. At last, Delta finally meets Tenenbaum where she's hiding with the little sisters. She tells Delta that she needs to protect the girls from Lamb at any cost, but once again the conversation is paused thanks to Lamb's broadcast.
Citizens of Rapture, this is Subject Delta. Behind that mask hides an enemy of the people.
She urges the city to kill Delta, announcing him as the ultimate enemy. Scared for the safety of the little girls, Tenenbaum tells Delta that she needs to leave now and find another safe spot. Before leaving, she shares that Eleanor is being held at Fontaine Futuristics on the opposite side of the city. Unfortunately, getting there will not be easy, but she introduces Delta to a businessman named Augustus Sinclair, who agrees to help guide him through Rapture and reach Eleanor. But if we learned anything from the first game, it is never to trust the guy guiding you on a radio. But Delta don't exactly have many options right now, so with Sinclair guiding him over the radio, he begins making his way toward Fontaine Futuristics. Unfortunately, navigating through Rapture is no child's play. The train tunnel leading to the next area is completely blocked by ice, and the only way through is with a plasmid called Incinerate. The only problem is Incinerate costs Atom, and Delta currently has 0 Atom. So Sinclair points him toward a nearby little sister, just like in the first game. Delta has to take down her Big Daddy protector before he can gain her trust. Once the Big Daddy is defeated, the little sister climbs onto Delta's shoulders and begins helping him gather Atom from corpses throughout the area. After the little sister finishes gathering Atom, Delta is given the same choice Jack faced in the first game: harvest the little sister for maximum Atom, or save her and turn her back into a normal kid. And once again, we're going to talk about the good ending. After collecting enough Atom, Delta purchases the Incinerate plasmid, melts the ice blocking the tunnel, and continues his journey toward Eleanor. But Sophia Lamb is not one to give up so easily. She locks down the entire railway system across Rapture. To reopen it, Delta needs an override key held by a woman named Grace Holloway. Grace used to be a jazz singer and one of Lamb's most loyal followers. Unfortunately, just like Lamb, she absolutely hates Delta. And the moment she hears he's nearby, she starts broadcasting threats over the radio and promising to hang them from a streetlight.
When we hang you from a street light and you choking out your last, I want you to remember my face.
Why do they all have to be so fracking harsh, man? Come on. Anyway, as Delta explores the area, he slowly learns why Grace despises him so much. Years ago, when Sophia Lamb was imprisoned by Andrew Ryan, thanks to her increasing popularity in Rapture, she left her daughter in Grace's care. Grace looked after Eleanor and deeply cared for the little girl until one day she saw her walking around as a little sister alongside Delta. When Grace tried to approach her, Delta attacked and broke her jaw. But of course, Delta wasn't acting on free will at the time. He was just another Big Daddy following his conditioning. However, Grace never knew that. To her, Delta was the monster who stole Eleanor away and turned her into a little sister, which is obviously not true. Meanwhile, Delta takes help from the little sisters to extract Atom from corpses, and Lamb sends Big Sisters to save them. Another hidden secret that is revealed at this point is that since the original little sisters are growing older, Lamb has started sending Big Sister to the surface to abduct new girls and bring them back to Rapture, where they can be turned into the next generation of little sisters, which is an absolutely horrifying thing to do. Meanwhile, Eleanor contacts Delta once again. She's able to do this through the psychic bond they share as Big Daddy and little sister. She guides him towards a special kind of plasmid that'll help keep his heart beating until he finds her. Eventually, Delta reaches Grace's apartment, and this happens.
I know what you're here for. Go on, take it. I won't have you touching me.
Delta obtains the override key, and at this point, the player faces another major choice: kill Grace or spare her. If Delta shows mercy, Grace begins questioning everything Lamb has told her and starts realizing that Delta may not be the monster she believed him to be. If he chooses to kill her, well, then she dies. With the override key finally secured, the railway system finally reopens and Delta makes his way forward. Right when things are starting to look better for Delta, somebody blows up the train car and sends it crashing into the next area. Seriously, someone give this man a break! The crash leaves Delta stranded in Dionysus Park, a once beautiful entertainment district that is now partially flooded and falling apart. While searching for a way forward, Delta begins hearing from Father Simon Wales, another one of Sophia Lamb's most devoted followers. He genuinely believes Sophia Lamb is humanity's best hope and spends most of his time preaching her philosophy while trying to stop Delta from reaching Eleanor. Eventually, Delta tracks him down and kills him, removing yet another obstacle standing in his way. However, that's where he finds out what Wales and Lamb are really doing with Eleanor. See, Adam doesn't just alter a person's body, it also carries fragments of memories, emotions, and experiences from the people who used it before. After years of civil war, addiction, and countless plasmid injections, pieces of nearly every citizen in Rapture still exists within the city's remaining atom supply. Lamb's plan is to gather all of that atom and inject it into Eleanor specifically. She believes that by carrying the thoughts and suffering of an entire city, Eleanor will become the first truly selfless human being ever. Has anyone told her about Jesus? She wants to make Eleanor the perfect person, someone who always puts others before herself, and through her, Lamb will eventually succeed in building a utopia that Ryan never could. Creepy as all hell. As he continues through the park, Delta is contacted by a man named Stanley Poole. Stanley used to be a reporter before somehow failing his way into becoming the manager of Dionysus Park, and right now he's hiding inside a secure control booth and refuses to help Delta unlock the way forward unless he deals with the Little Sisters wandering around the area collecting Atom.
Get rid of the Little Sisters for me. Your way. Do that, and I'll unlock the station here. Scout's honor.
As Delta works to the district, Eleanor contacts him again and begins revealing Stan's dirty little secrets. Basically, when Sophia Lamb was locked away, she left Stanley in charge of the park. Rather than taking that responsibility seriously, he embezzled money and threw lavish parties. When Eleanor confronted him about it, Stanley panicked and sold her off to an orphanage.
I confronted Stanley, said I'd tell Mother what he had done. He panicked, took me away and sold me to an orphanage.
And that's how Eleanor became a Little Sister. He later flooded large sections of Dionysus Park to cover up his corruption, killing countless of innocents in the process. And that's why he wants Delta to take away the atom from the little girls, because if it gets back to Lamb, she'll find out what Stanley did to her people. But hold up, that's not all. As Delta goes around saving or harvesting the Little Sisters, Stanley reveals that he once did a feature on him and reveals information about Delta that he himself had long forgotten. Stanley tells Delta that before becoming a Big Daddy, Delta was a deep-sea diver from the surface known throughout Rapture as Johnny Topside. He had accidentally discovered the underwater city and quickly became somewhat of a celebrity among its citizens. Unfortunately, Andrew Ryan wasn't exactly thrilled that some random diver had found his secret city, so Ryan had him arrested and sent to Persephone, Rapture's underwater prison. Eventually, he was selected for the Alpha Series Big Daddy program, where his memories, identity, and free will were stripped away until all that remained was Subject Delta. And if all that wasn't sad enough, Lamb then takes over the radio and tells Delta that all this time she knew about Stanley and everything he had done to Dionysus Park in her absence, and she had forgiven him, but also drops the bomb that of all people, it was Stanley who had exposed Johnny to Ryan in the first place. Eventually, Delta corners Stanley inside his control booth. Terrified, Stanley hands over the access codes and begs for his life. Once again, the player is given a choice: kill him or spare him. Whatever decision you make directly affects the ending for Eleanor because she's closely watching every step you take thanks to the bond you share with her as her Big Daddy. After dealing with Stanley, Delta continues his journey towards Fontaine Futuristics. After leaving Dionysus Park behind, Delta eventually arrives at Fontaine Futuristics, one of the major research facilities responsible for creating Big Daddies and Little Sisters. Here, Delta begins listening to audio logs left behind by Dr. Gilbert Alexander, one of the scientists who helped create the Alpha Series Big Daddies in the first place.
Hello. My name is Gilbert Alexander, and by the time you hear this, I will be clinically insane.
Yeah, he did go insane. Years of Adam experimentation transformed Gilbert into a grotesque mutant now barely recognizable as human. Through his recordings, Delta learns that Alexander was one of Sophia Lamb's closest allies and fully supported her vision for Rapture. Unfortunately, Lamb decided to test some of her more radical theories on Gilbert himself. Needless to say, it did not go well. As stated, the man became horribly mutated and slowly lost his sanity, leaving behind recordings begging anyone who found them to stop what he had become. As Delta explores the facility, he follows instructions left behind by Gilbert's past self while simultaneously being hunted by Gilbert's present self in a flying security machine who refers to himself as Alexander the Great. Through a series of audio logs, Gilbert's sane self explains that his mutated body is hidden deep beneath Fontaine Futuristics and asks Delta to stop him before he even becomes more dangerous. To do this, Delta must travel throughout the facility collecting samples from specially engineered Adam-infused plants. Gilbert explains that these plants produce a scent that his mutated body cannot resist. After gathering enough samples, Delta uses them to bait Alexander into a containment chamber where he can finally confront the source of the threat directly. After trapping the creature, Delta gains access to Gilbert's genetic key, which provides the clearance needed to continue his journey toward Persephone. Before leaving, though, Delta faces yet another moral decision. Gilbert's old recordings beg Delta to put him out of his misery, but when confronted face-to-face, the mutated Alexander desperately pleads for his life. So once again, the player must make a choice: mercy or execution. And once again, whatever you choose, Eleanor is in fact watching. Now Delta makes his way to the underwater prison, and this place is not exactly known for its 5-star reviews. Years ago, Persephone was where Andrew Ryan sent anyone he considered a threat to Rapture: political enemies, criminals, smugglers, and apparently unsuspecting deep-sea divers who discovered the city by accident. Which means Delta is finally returning to the very place where Johnny Topside ceased to exist and Subject Delta was created. After fighting through the prison, Delta reaches Eleanor's holding cell where they are finally reunited, but only from afar.
Your signal's breaking up. I can see or hear a thing. Something blocking me.
Look at her, Delta. 10 years, and still she dreams of you.
Before Delta can enter the quarantine chamber, Sophia Lamb shows up to ruin it. She reveals that after Delta died 10 years ago, it was Eleanor who secretly used Rapture's Vita chambers to bring him back to life. Ever since then, the two remained connected, and through this bond, Eleanor is able to communicate with Delta from afar and even see everything he does throughout Rapture, including the acts of mercy and revenge, which we already knew by now. But with this, Lamb realizes that Eleanor's bond with Delta is way stronger than years of her own conditioning. So in one last desperate attempt to stop him, she temporarily smothers Eleanor, stopping her heart. Since Delta's life is tied to Eleanor's, the moment her heart stops, so does his.
Eleanor, forgive me.
And just like that, Delta falls into a coma. When Delta finally wakes up, things have somehow gotten even weirder. He's strapped to an operating table with no way out. Fortunately, Eleanor has a plan. Using the bond she shares with Delta, she guides him through the prison by allowing him to temporarily see through the eyes of a little sister. And we get to see how different Rapture looks through the eyes of the little ones. Through this strange little detour, Delta gathers the parts Eleanor needs for her escape. Eleanor realizes that if she wants to save Delta, she can no longer remain the helpless little girl everyone sees her as, so she decides to become a big sister. Using parts gathered throughout Persephone, Eleanor builds her own big sister suit and fully embraces the power she inherited from years of Adam exposure. Once she's fully suited up, Eleanor storms in, frees Delta, and absolutely demolishes anyone standing in her way. From this point onward, she's no longer the person Delta is trying to rescue, she's his partner, and together they're finally ready to escape Rapture. Since Eleanor is free now, Sophia Lamb completely loses it. Realizing that Eleanor is beyond her control now, Lamb decides that if she can't have her daughter, then nobody can. She rigs Persephone with explosives and prepares to sink the entire prison into a nearby ocean trench. You know, pretty standard parental behavior in Rapture. As Delta and Eleanor fight their way through the collapsing facility, they discover one final problem. The only person carrying the master key needed to unlock Persephone's escape systems is Augustus Sinclair, who entered the prison to save Delta but got caught. And now Lamb has turned him into a big daddy. And even worse, he's under her control, but tries his best not to hurt Delta or Eleanor. When Delta finally reaches him, Sinclair begs for him to end his life, so with a heavy heart, Delta grants his wish.
So long, kid. Thank you.
Rest in peace, Sinclair. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. You're the real homie, dude. After Sinclair's tragic death, Delta retrieves the Master Key and unlocks the prison's evacuation systems. Eleanor and the rescued little sisters make their way to Sinclair's escape vessel while Delta stays behind to activate the docking controls. To launch the vessel, he must first equalize the water pressure by flooding the docking chamber. After fighting through one final wave of splicers and flooding the chamber, Delta rushes towards the escape craft as the prison begins collapsing around him. But just as freedom is finally within reach, boom! A group of Lamb's followers detonate a series of explosives directly in Delta's path. The blast tears through the hallway and catches Delta head-on. After everything he survived throughout the game, this is the hit that finally breaks him. Meanwhile, Eleanor barely manages to teleport herself inside the rising vessel before the explosion reaches her. She tries to grab Delta, but misses. With Persephone collapsing and the ocean pouring in from every direction, Delta uses the last of his strength to swim forward and grab onto the outside of the escape pod as it launches toward the surface. As water continues flooding parts of the vessel, Delta's body is shutting down. The explosion inside Persephone pushed his already heavily modified body beyond its limits, and this is where the choices you made throughout the game finally come into play. If you saved every little sister, Eleanor grows into a compassionate person because of Delta's example. Now, what happens to Sophia Lamb depends on how Delta treated the major characters throughout the story. If Delta spared Grace Holloway, Stanley Poole, and Gilbert Alexander, Eleanor chooses forgiveness. When Sophia Lamb begins drowning inside the vessel, Eleanor pulls her to safety and saves her life. Even after everything Lamb has done, Eleanor refuses to become like her. As Delta takes his final breaths, Eleanor gently absorbs his memories and experiences, preserving the best parts of the man who spent the entire game trying to save her.
You are my conscience, Father, and I need you to guide me.
She reaches the surface determined to use everything Delta taught her to help others and make the world a better place. However, if Delta saved all the little sisters but killed Grace, Stanley, and Gilbert, Eleanor still becomes a good person, but she also learns that some actions deserve consequences. This time she lets Sophia die as she drags her underwater, not out of hatred, but because she believes Lamb has forfeited her right to keep hurting people. That's not a right, but you know what I mean. Anyway, Eleanor still honors Delta's sacrifice and carries his lessons into the future. If you saved some little sisters and harvested others, Eleanor ends up getting caught somewhere in the middle. At the end, she gives Delta a choice. She can absorb his atom and memories to preserve him within herself, or Delta can let himself die completely. If Delta allows Eleanor to absorb him, she reaches the surface carrying both his kindness and his brutality. She's not evil, but she's not entirely good either. She's left struggling to understand who she really wants to become. If Delta chooses to sacrifice himself instead, Eleanor begins to understand the true meaning of selflessness. Watching him willingly give up his life for her inspires her to become a better person than either Sophia Lamb or Rapture ever intended. Honestly, one of the saddest endings in the entire franchise. If you harvested every little sister throughout the game, well, things go very, very wrong. Eleanor grows into a ruthless and selfish person who embraces the lessons Delta had taught her. Depending on the player's final choice, she either absorbs Delta's memories willingly or carries his influence with her in another form, but the result is basically the same. She views survival and power as the only things that matter. After reaching the surface, Eleanor looks upon the world above and sees it as something to conquer rather than to protect. The final narration makes it very clear that humanity is about to have a very bad day. And this is how BioShock 2 comes to an end. And despite everything that happened, I'm just glad that we got good endings out of this. Before we move on to BioShock Infinite, let's quickly talk about a few BioShock 2 DLCs that are pretty popular amongst fans. The first DLC was Sinclair Solutions Tester Pack. This expansion focused entirely on multiplayer and added several new playable characters, including Louis McGrath and Oscar Caraca. It also introduced new weapons, additional rank progression, and a handful of gameplay upgrades for multiplayer matches. Since BioShock 2's multiplayer takes place before the fall of Rapture and lets players relive the city's final days through the eyes of Sinclair Solutions test subjects, this DLC was mainly designed to give multiplayer fans more content to unlock and experiment with. If you only played BioShock 2 for the story, you're honestly not missing much here. The second DLC was Rapture Metro Pack. Much like the Sinclair Solutions Tester Pack, this expansion was also focused entirely on multiplayer. It introduced 6 new multiplayer maps, increased the level cap, added new achievements, and gave players access to additional customization options. The DLC also added a brand new game mode called Kill 'em Kindly, where players fought using only melee attacks.
which basically turned BioShock into a giant underwater fistfight. Again, if you were mainly here for the story, this DLC wasn't essential, but multiplayer fans got plenty of new content to mess around with. The next DLC was Protector Trials, which was aimed more at single-player fans. It placed players in the role of a Big Daddy whose sole job was to protect a little sister while she gathered Adam from corpses. Completing the trials also unlocked additional audio diaries that expanded on the relationship between Big Daddies and little sisters. It wasn't a massive story expansion, but it was a fun side experience that let players fully embrace the role of Rapture's most overprotective babysitter. And finally, we have Minerva's Den, one of the most loved DLCs in the BioShock saga. Unlike the previous ones, Minerva's Den tells a completely new story separate from Subject Delta and Eleanor. This time we play as Subject Sigma, another Alpha Series Big Daddy who awakens in a previously unseen section of Rapture known as Minerva's Den. Sigma's recruited by a scientist named Charles Milton Porter, who needs help stopping his former business partner, Reed Wall. At the center of the conflict is the Thinker, an incredibly advanced supercomputer capable of analyzing massive amounts of data and predicting outcomes with near-perfect accuracy. Porter originally created the Thinker to help improve life inside Rapture, but Reed became obsessed with its power, seized control of the machine, and turned Minerva's Den into his personal fortress. As Sigma fights through Splicers, security systems, and Wall's forces, he slowly uncovers fragments of his lost memories. Eventually, he learns that Subject Sigma isn't just another Big Daddy. Before his transformation, he was actually Charles Milton Porter himself. After losing his wife, Pearl, Porter attempted to erase his grief by transferring his memories into the Thinker. When that failed, he was forcibly turned into Subject Sigma and stripped of his identity. So throughout the game, the voice on the radio guiding you isn't the real Porter, it's the Thinker itself using a simulation of Porter's voice. In the final moments of the DLC, Sigma defeats Wall, regains his memories, and manages to print out the Thinker's stored data. Unlike most BioShock stories, Minerva's Den actually ends on a surprisingly hopeful note of emotional healing. Sigma escapes Rapture alongside Dr. Tenenbaum, who successfully restores him back to his human form as Charles Porter. And rather than trying to bring his wife back through technology, Porter visits Pearl's real grave on the surface, finally accepting her death and choosing to let her go.
Alright, so moving on to the final game of the trilogy, BioShock Infinite, released in 2013. This time, the story takes us to the floating city of Columbia high above the clouds. And let me tell you right now, this game has by far the most confusing storyline with time travel, multiverses, infinite realities. So, to make it easier for you and for myself, let me introduce you to all the MVPs. Starting off with Booker DeWitt, our main protagonist, a former soldier turned private investigator who's currently drowning in a lot of debt. Until one day he's offered a simple job of retrieving a girl to clear the accounts. Then we have Elizabeth, a mysterious young woman who's been locked away inside a giant tower for most of her life. She's smart, curious, and desperately wants to see the world beyond her prison, especially Paris. Unfortunately for her, she's not allowed to leave though, and that's partially because of Songbird, a giant mechanical bird that serves as Elizabeth's protector, prison guard, and emotionally unstable helicopter parent, all rolled into one terrifying metal package. Then we got Zachary Hale Comstock, aka Father Comstock, the self-proclaimed prophet of Columbia and ruler of the floating city. Next up we have Rosalind and Robert Ludus, or the Ludus twins. These two show up randomly throughout the game, speak mostly in riddles, and somehow always seem to know exactly what's going on. There's also Daisy Fitzroy, the leader of the Vox Populi, a revolutionary group made up of Columbia's oppressed workers and minorities. And finally, we have Jeremiah Fink. He's Columbia's richest businessman, inventor, industrialist, and professional exploiter of cheap labor. Now that we got the introductions out of the way, let's head into the clouds. The year is 1912, and the game begins with Booker DeWitt sitting in a small rowboat during a storm. Accompanying him are none other than the Ludus twins, who remind him of the job he's been hired to do: bring us the girl and wipe away the debt. The boat eventually arrives at a tiny island containing nothing but a lighthouse, which is a BioShock trademark at this point. After heading inside, Booker discovers that this is no ordinary lighthouse. Hidden at the top is what appears to be a giant rocket-powered chair. Without asking any questions, Booker sits in the creepy-looking chair, and a few seconds later, he's blasted into the sky.
10,000 feet. 15,000 feet. Hallelujah.
When the ride finally ends, Booker discovers he's in a massive city floating in the air. Welcome to Columbia, mate. Before entering the city, Booker's forced to undergo a baptism ceremony where a priest dunks him underwater while asking him to accept the prophet's blessing.
I baptize you in the name of our prophet, in the name of our founders, and the name of our Lord.
There is a stark difference between baptizing and literal drowning. After surviving a very clear murder attempt, Booker wakes up in the city of Columbia and begins exploring. At first glance, the place looks fracking incredible. Beautiful buildings, clean streets, happy citizens. The only thing that seems off are the huge statues of the man known as Father Comstock. The people here practically worship the man, and his teachings are treated like holy scripture, which is usually not a great sign when the person of worship is a flawed human being. Along the way, Booker learns more about how Columbia operates. Beneath all the smiling faces and colorful celebrations lies a much uglier reality. The city is deeply racist, heavily militarized, and obsessed with the idea that its citizens are superior to everyone living below on the surface. Anyone who doesn't fit Comstock's vision of society is treated as lesser, so the city's basically a flying cult. Anyway, Booker continues making his way through Columbia until he arrives at a public fair celebrating the city's greatness. There, he receives a strange message from the Ludus twins urging him not to let Comstock know about his presence, but Booker doesn't pay much attention to that for some reason. Eventually, he finds himself participating in a raffle. You see, things were pretty peaceful for him up until this point, but stuff's about to go down. As Booker wins the raffle, he's handed a baseball, and at first it seems harmless, but then he realizes the prize is actually the opportunity to throw the ball at an interracial couple being publicly humiliated for entertainment.
Come on! Are you gonna throw it? Or are you taking your coffee black these days?
At this point, the player gets to make a moral choice to either throw the ball at the couple or the announcer. But before Booker can actually do what you choose, the authorities stop him when they notice a marking on his hand. The letters AD, a mark that matches a prophecy known throughout Columbia as the mark of the false shepherd. Within seconds, the celebration turns into a manhunt. Police officers, soldiers, and practically the entire city begins hunting Booker down. And just like that, our peaceful tour of Columbia comes to an end, and Booker's mission to find the mysterious girl has officially begun. After becoming Columbia's most wanted man alive, Booker has no choice but to fight his way through the city. Along the way, he gets his hands on a vigor, which is like Columbia's version of plasmid, called the Devil's Kiss, which basically lets him throw fire with his hand. And must I say, whenever you get one of these things, it gets a little cute animation with people who talk old-timey like this. I didn't know how else to say it. As Booker pushes forward, he encounters the Ludus twins once again. This time, Rosalind Ludus gives him a strange device called a shield infusion, which creates a protective energy barrier around his body as the twins continue speaking in riddles. As Booker continues making his way through Columbia, he begins seeing the city's ugly side firsthand, the racism and discrimination that were hiding beneath Columbia's beautiful exterior. And sadly, none of this is completely new to him. Years before the events of the game, Booker fought in the Battle of Wounded Knee, where he witnessed and even took part in an absolutely horrific massacre. The trauma from said events left him deeply broken, sending him down a spiral of guilt, alcoholism, and gambling debts, which explains why he's such a mess by the time the story begins. Not long after, Booker finally comes face to face with Comstock. And strangely enough, this guy seems to know an awful lot about Booker's personal life, including the fact he's in major debt and now is on a mission to repay it all.
Now, to repay a debt, you've come from my land. But not all debts can be repaid, Booker.
Comstock continues broadcasting messages to the citizens, urging them to stop the false shepherd before he can corrupt Columbia's future and take away their greatest treasure, his daughter. Yeah, apparently the mysterious girl Booker's been looking for is none other than Comstock's daughter. It just had to be, right? However, thanks to all this, Booker's able to find out that she's being held at some place called Monument Island, so there's that. When Booker finally reaches this Monument Island, he spots a massive tower stretching high into the clouds and begins making his way inside. As he climbs higher, he eventually catches his first glimpse of Elizabeth, and the girl has no idea she's being watched. She's dancing around, reading books, painting, trying to make the most of her lonely life, but just when you'd think that she's just a normal girl, she opens a glowing portal to frackin' Paris.
Whoa!
Booker eventually makes his way into the tower and crashes right into the middle of Elizabeth's library, scaring the absolute life out of her. Elizabeth launches a full-on book attack at him, throwing every book she can find directly at his face with her 9 3/4 fingers, because if you look closely, she's missing the tip of one of her pinky fingers. As Booker tries to explain that he's there to help her escape, she understandably doesn't trust a random stranger who just fell through her ceiling. Eventually, Booker shows her the key that unlocks the tower's exit, and Elizabeth reluctantly agrees to follow him. The two begin making their way out, but unfortunately also, Songbird catches them escaping, and they're not about to let that happen. The giant mechanical bird smashes through walls, shatters entire sections of the tower, and turns the place into a collapsing death trap. Kinda like what the dragon did in Shrek 1 to the tower Fiona was in. A man pounds on the door demanding that Booker hand over the girl. Confused, Booker approaches the door and calls out to someone named Anna.
Appeal to wit!
Tell me what you want with her.
Open this door right now!
Anna!
The moment he opens it, the vision disappears and Booker suddenly wakes up. Great, another mystery added to the ever-growing pile of questions. Booker wakes up on Columbia's artificial beach only to discover that Elizabeth has already wandered off after hearing music nearby, and can you blame her? I mean, the girl's been trapped in a tower for her whole frackin' life. Of course she's gonna stop and enjoy freedom for 5 minutes. Booker eventually finds her dancing with strangers, and it's actually a pretty wholesome moment.
This is wonderful! Oh, come dance with me, Mr. Dwayne.
I don't dance. Come on, let's go.
Why? What could be better than this?
To get her moving again, Booker promises that he'll take her to Paris, and she immediately agrees to go with him, which is obviously a lie, because his real plan is to get an airship, take Elizabeth out of Columbia, complete his mission, and collect whatever reward he's been promised. As they continue toward the airship, the Ludus twins suddenly appear once again and ask Elizabeth to choose between two pendants, a bird and a cage.
Bird?
Or the cage.
Or perhaps the bird.
Nothing beats the cage.
Shockingly, considering BioShock, I didn't actually mean the pun that time, the choice doesn't actually affect the story, but it's one of those moments that'll make a lot more sense at the end. As Booker and Elizabeth make their way through the city, Columbia's police finally catch up to them. Booker is forced to fight back, even killing several officers in the process. This completely horrifies Elizabeth.
You killed those people!
Booker explains that whoever kept her locked inside Monument Island clearly isn't going to let her leave peacefully. If they're going to escape Columbia, they're going to have to fight for it. Eventually, Elizabeth understands that Booker was protecting her, and the two begin working together again. To reach the airship, Booker and Elizabeth first need to restore power to a gondola system. The only way to do that is by finding an electrical vigor named Shock Jockey.
You can press the button to shoot electricity or hold it for a shocking trap.
Sorry, I love the way he talks. But we haven't gotten that far yet. So they head toward the Hall of Heroes to find it, but halfway there, their elevator suddenly gets stuck. As Booker tries to figure out what went wrong, Elizabeth casually opens another one of her glowing portals to get rid of an annoying bee. Completely bamboozled, Booker asks Elizabeth what the hell she just did. Elizabeth explains the portals are called tears, which are cracks leading to alternate realities. She can't create them, but she can widen them, and sometimes even pull things through from the other side.
Is that?
It's a tear. I used to open them all the time in my tower.
What is a tear?
It's like a window. A window to another world.
Alright, so that's how she killed time in the tower. Anyway, the elevator finally gets moving again, and the pair heads into the Hall of Heroes. There, Booker is contacted by Cornelius Slate, a former war hero who once fought alongside Father Comstock during Columbia's military campaigns. Problem is, Slate absolutely despises Comstock now. According to him, Comstock stole credit for victories won by ordinary soldiers and built his entire reputation on their sacrifices. Sounds like something Comstock would do. After fighting through Slate's followers and making his way through the Hall of Heroes, Booker finally comes face to face with the old soldier. And by this point, rather than continuing the fight, he asks Booker for one final favor: a soldier's death. Here, the player can either kill him or leave him alive, but either way, Booker obtains Shock Jockey, restores power to the gondola, and finally clears the path to the airship. At long last, Booker and Elizabeth board the vessel. During the ride, Elizabeth brings up something that's been bothering her. While Booker was unconscious, he kept calling her Anna, and out of curiosity, she asks who Anna is. Booker immediately shuts the conversation down and refuses to explain further. As the airship finally lifts off, Elizabeth is beyond excited to visit Paris, the city she's spent years dreaming about from inside her tower. Unfortunately, that excitement lasts for about 30 seconds because the moment Booker enters the flight coordinates, Elizabeth realizes they're headed to New York, not Paris. She confronts Booker about this, and he admits that rescuing her was never about helping her see the world. It was a job to wipe away the debt. Hearing this, Elizabeth completely breaks down. "Great going, Bookie." Booker tries to explain himself. Elizabeth grabs a wrench and knocks him unconscious. Okay, that escalated quickly. While he's out cold, the Vox Populi, a revolutionary movement led by Daisy Fitzroy, if you don't remember, boards and seizes the airship. Furious at Booker for lying to her, Elizabeth runs away, hoping to escape Columbia on her own. By the time Booker wakes up, the ship is under Daisy's control, and Elizabeth is nowhere to be seen.
There's already a fight to win. Only question is, which side you on?
Daisy offers Booker a deal. If he helps the Vox acquire weapons for their uprising, she'll return the airship. Since Booker doesn't exactly have any better options right now, he agrees. Before anything else, however, he tracks Elizabeth down in Beggar's Wharf, where she's been cornered after trying to escape on her own. The two reconcile and continue working together, and their search for weapons eventually leads them to a gunsmith named Chen Lin. Unfortunately, when they arrive, they meet Lin's wife, who tells them that Chen Lin has been arrested and taken away. As Booker and Elizabeth investigate, they become entangled in the growing conflict between Columbia's ruling class and the Vox Populi. At the center of it all is Jeremiah Fink, the wealthy industrialist who has built an empire on cheap labor and exploitation, who also somehow wants to offer Booker a job.
Do you know how many people would kill to be head of Fink Security?
Booker immediately declines the offer. It's not like he has the capacity for another job right now, right? During all this, Elizabeth also finds the diary of her mother where she writes that she won't allow her husband's bastard child to live under her roof, which means it was her mother who had locked her in the tower for her entire life. The deeper Booker travels, the clearer it becomes that Columbia's utopia only works because thousands of workers are being crushed beneath it. The pair finally track Chen Lin down in one of Fink's prison cells, only to find him dead. And if Lin's dead, who's gonna make the guns for Daisy? Suddenly, the Ludus twins arrive in the cell. They tell Booker that Chen Lin may be dead here, but he's pretty much alive in another reality, another Columbia. Both Booker and Elizabeth are unsure at first, but since they don't really have another option, Elizabeth opens a tear, and they both enter it. Booker and Elizabeth step through the tear and quickly realize they've entered a completely different version of Columbia, like they were probably expecting at this point. The good news is that Chen's alive here. Bad news is years of imprisonment and torture have completely shattered his mind state. He barely recognizes his wife, can't focus on anything around him, and certainly isn't in any condition to start building weapons for a revolution. According to Lin's wife, getting his tools back might help restore his memory, so Booker sets off to retrieve them. Simple enough, right? No, because when they arrive at the location where the tools are supposed to be, they discover they're gone. Which means there's only one solution: jump into yet another reality. These figures are just being Rick and Morty at this point. This came out first, didn't it? I forgot when Rick and Morty... Man, I'm getting old, dude. The moment they step through the next tear, though, they realize this one is far too different from the previous one. Here, the Vox Populi revolution has already begun, and the city is at war. Somehow, Booker DeWitt of this Columbia is dead. Not gonna... That's quite the bomb to drop. Turns out this reality's Booker became a martyr for the Vox Populi, inspiring the entire revolution before being killed.
You're Booker DeWitt, the hero of the Vox!
As Booker sees his poster everywhere, he starts seeing flashbacks to the revolution and his nose starts to bleed. And this becomes a problem for them because when the supposedly dead man suddenly starts walking around again, people notice. The Vox assume that this Booker must be an imposter and immediately turn against him. Honestly, I'd be confused too. As the revolution spirals out of control, Booker and Elizabeth find Chen and his wife dead in this reality. Taking this opportunity, Daisy Fitzroy corners Jeremiah Fink and kills him, but before she leaves, she threatens to murder Fink's young son as well. At this point, even Elizabeth realizes things have gone too far, so she sneaks behind Daisy and kills her with a pair of scissors.
Get rid of the weed, you gotta pull it up from the root. It's the only way to do.
This event deeply traumatizes Elizabeth, and she runs away from Booker. Booker catches up to Elizabeth and finally reunites with her on an airship. However, after killing Daisy, she looks like a completely different person. She's cut her hair, changed her dress, no longer resembles the girl who left the tower, that's for sure. Booker tries to comfort her, but unfortunately Songbird chooses this exact moment to attack. It tears the airship apart, forcing Booker and Elizabeth to crash land, and exactly when needed, the Ludus twins pay them a visit again. They tell Elizabeth that if she knows how to sing to the bird, she can easily control him, and then he will do whatever she tells him to, because that's what Comstock uses to control it. So the pair decides it's time to head towards Comstock House, and Elizabeth makes Booker promise that he'll kill her before Comstock can take her back to the tower.
But promise me that if it comes to it, you will not let him take me back.
It won't come to that. All right?
When they finally reach Comstock House, they discover that the entrance can only be opened using Lady Comstock's fingerprints. This sends the pair on yet another unusual mission to retrieve Lady Comstock's hand from her grave, which is very messed up, but BioShock for you. Elizabeth, though, isn't exactly feeling charitable toward the woman she believes helped keep her imprisoned for most of her life. Before they can carry out the plan, Comstock intervenes. He uses a mini siphon device that temporarily hijacks Elizabeth's powers and pulls a version of Lady Comstock from another reality. The result is a furious ghost version of Elizabeth's supposed mother, who's very angry. Both Booker and Elizabeth are as confused as you and I as they try to fight off the ghost of Lady Comstock. The Ludus twins appear once again, and this time they're digging two graves as they explain the fluid nature of time and the multiverse.
Lives, lived, will live.
Dies, died, will die.
According to the twins, Lady Comstock is trapped between multiple realities at once. To her, she's simultaneously alive, dead, and everything in between if there is a between. The result is this angry ghost-like version of her that keeps attacking them. They further explain that if Booker and Elizabeth wanted to stop trying to kill them and open the gates to Comstock House, they must uncover 3 alternate reality truths to appease her troubled spirit, so they get to work. Through these tears, Elizabeth uncovers that Father Comstock was never the perfect prophet he claimed to be. Big shocker. I'm sorry, I can't help it. Years of using tear technology had rendered him sterile, making it impossible for him to have children of his own. Yet somehow he still ended up with Elizabeth. Anyway, this is also where we learn more about the tear technology. You see, the Ludus twins are not exactly brother and sister. In fact, they're the exact same person, just from 2 different realities. Rosalind Ludus is a scientist who discovered the quantum mechanics required to make the city fly, whereas Robert Ludus is the male version of her from a different universe. After Rosalind figured out how to open tears between realities, she communicated with Robert, and they eventually managed to cross over and live together in the same universe, passing themselves off as twins. Anyway, once Lady Comstock discovers these truths, Comstock has her killed. And not just her. Since the twins know a little too much as well, he orders Jeremiah Fink to kill them too. However, his plan backfires. Instead of dying, the accident scattered the twins across countless realities, allowing them to exist almost everywhere all at once, which explains how they randomly appear and disappear from anywhere. When the truth is finally revealed, Lady Comstock realizes that Elizabeth wasn't the cause of her suffering. She was just another victim of Comstock's lies. Her spirit finally finds peace, and our duo gains access to Comstock House. As Booker and Elizabeth make their way toward Comstock House, Songbird attacks once again. This time, though, Elizabeth realizes there's no escaping him. To save Booker's life, she willingly surrenders and allows Songbird to take her back. Now separated, Booker pushes deeper into Comstock House. As he explores the building, strange tears begin opening around him. Through them, he witnesses glimpses of a future where Elizabeth waited years for Booker to rescue her, but he never came, and she eventually gave up hope. Exactly as Comstock wanted. Over time, he molded Elizabeth into a successor, shaping her into the ruler of Columbia. Under his influence, she inherited his hatred, ideology, and eventually whole vision for the world. When Booker finally comes face to face with this older Elizabeth, she tells him,
"It was time. Time rots everything, Booker. Even hope."
I was coming.
Songbird.
She pulls Booker forward into the year 1984 and shows him the destruction she helped cause. She further explains that the future can still be changed and gives him one more crucial bit of information to pass on to the younger Elizabeth, the musical sequence needed to control Songbird. Armed with this knowledge, Booker gets back to 1912 with one final mission: save Elizabeth before she becomes this cruel version of herself. Booker books to Comstock's laboratory where Elizabeth is being tortured and experimented on. He shuts down the machines connected to her and finally frees her from Comstock's control. Before they leave, Booker hands her the message that her future self left for her. After seeing everything that awaits her, Elizabeth comes to a painful realization. The only way to stop all of this is to stop Comstock once and for all.
I know you.
I'm not going to let you kill him.
Really? Booker? What are you going to do to stop me?
Not a damn thing. Because I'm going to do it for you.
I thought that was a given. With their minds made up, the pair head for Comstock's flagship to finally confront him. Booker and Elizabeth finally make it to Comstock's flagship and fight their way to his private chamber. There, they discover the siphon, the machine that's been suppressing Elizabeth's powers since she was a kid. At last, Elizabeth confronts Comstock and demands the truth about who she really is. But instead of answering her questions, Comstock points at Booker and claims that he already knows the truth, especially the truth about her missing pinky finger.
Ask him, child. Ask him what happened to your finger. Ask DeWitt.
Booker has no clue what the old man is talking about, and before Comstock can explain any further, he starts hurting Elizabeth, which turns out to be a bad decision because Booker does not appreciate that. In a moment of rage, Booker hits Comstock and drowns in the nearby baptismal font. Once he's dead, Booker swears to Elizabeth that he genuinely knows nothing about her missing finger. However, Elizabeth notices his bleeding nose and assumes that he knows something but has forgotten due to some alternate reality shenanigans. So they decide to destroy the main siphon machine so Elizabeth can regain her powers and uncover the truth by opening a tear into the past. Suddenly, they're attacked by the Vox Populi, and to save themselves, Elizabeth finally understands the message her future self sent. She sings the song, and the songbird arrives to protect her. After taking care of the Vox, Elizabeth orders the songbird to destroy the siphon in Monument Island. Once the machine is destroyed, Elizabeth regains full control of her powers. But because the music stops, the songbird goes out of control once again and approaches to attack the duo. Using her abilities, Elizabeth opens a huge tear, and suddenly the two are in rapture. And with this, the songbird dies underwater as Elizabeth bids it farewell. Following this, Booker and Elizabeth use the bathysphere, making their way towards the surface.
City at the bottom of the ocean. Ridiculous.
Yeah, like you didn't just fight a battle on a floating city above the clouds, right? As they emerge, they notice a familiar sight. The lighthouse. Yet the same one Jack arrived at. Elizabeth then points toward the stars above them and explains that they aren't stars at all. Each light is actually a doorway to another reality, and together they form a place known as the Sea of Doors. It's a realm that exists outside normal space-time, where every possible universe can be reached through a different door. As the pair enters through the lighthouse door, they arrive at the Sea of Doors, where they're surrounded by thousands upon thousands of doors, each one leading to a different universe. And beyond those doors stand countless lighthouses stretching endlessly into the distance.
There's always a lighthouse. There's always a man. There's always a city.
The pair walks through one of the doors and catches a glimpse of another Booker and Elizabeth doing the exact same thing somewhere else. And that's when Elizabeth starts explaining what is actually going on. See, according to her, there are infinite realities existing simultaneously. Some are wildly different, while others are nearly identical. But despite all those differences, certain constants always remain the same. There's always a lighthouse, there's always a city, and there's always a man.
We swim in different oceans but land on the same shore.
Booker struggles to wrap his head around any of this multiverse nonsense, so Elizabeth further explains that no matter how different these realities appear, they all eventually lead back to the same place, the same choice, the same moment. And before Booker can ask any further questions, she opens another door and leads him through it. On the other side waits a familiar riverbank. It's the site of Booker's baptism and the day it all began. Booker recalls being in this place about 20 years ago. The priest asks him to step forward if he's ready to have his past erased and be born again to start a new life. However, Booker doesn't go through with the baptism. He steps back and tells Elizabeth that he wants no part in all this anymore. He just wants to leave. Maybe finally go to Paris and forget all this ever happened. But Elizabeth urges him to find Comstock. She explains that Booker may have killed him, but there are still many versions of him in different universes that exist and will eventually bring destruction to the world. The next door they step through takes Booker into another memory from his past where he hears a familiar phrase, "Bring us the girl and wipe away the debt." At first, Booker thinks he's remembering the moment he was given the mission to rescue Elizabeth, but then he watches himself enter a room with a baby in a crib.
Wait, no, this is wrong. What is this? There was no baby. I remember.
See, years ago, drowning in debt and desperate for money, Booker agreed to sell his infant daughter, Anna DeWitt. The man who took her was Robert Ludus, and the child was carried away into another reality. The letters A.D. engraved on his hands are nothing but his daughter's initials. Then Elizabeth opens another door and forces Booker to witness what happened next. The moment Booker realized what he'd done, he desperately tried to take Anna back. A struggle broke out between him and Comstock as the tear connecting their two realities began closing. Booker pulled from one side, Comstock from the other. Then, just as the portal slammed shut, Anna's pinky finger was severed. And that's when the final piece falls into place. Elizabeth is missing her pinky finger because Elizabeth and Anna are the same person. Elizabeth then explains that after losing his daughter, Booker was consumed by guilt. He spent years trying to forget what he'd done, and eventually when the Ludus twins offered him a chance to get Anna back, his memories became scrambled from all the reality hopping. Over time, his mind rewrote the truth into something easier to live with. Selling his daughter became a debt. Trying to rescue Anna became a job, and the phrase "bring us the girl and wipe away the debt" transformed into the mission that started the game. So technically, there was never some mysterious stranger hiring Booker to save Elizabeth. It was all his crowded memories and him getting his daughter back. Realizing everything Elizabeth has suffered because of his choices, Booker apologizes to her, but he realizes that a simple apology could never make up for everything that has happened. Though even now, he believes that Comstock is responsible for all of this, and the only solution is go back and stop the Fricker before he can steal Anna and destroy countless lives. Before entering the door to Comstock, Elizabeth asks Booker once again if he's absolutely sure he wants to do this, and he agrees.
Are you sure this is what you want?
I have to. It's the only way to undo what I've done to you.
But when Elizabeth opens the door, it somehow leads back to the day of Booker's baptism. So yeah, Elizabeth took him back here. Now, hold your breaths, people, because I'm about to tell you something absolutely fracking nuts. You see, Booker spent the entire game believing Comstock was some completely different person, but in reality, Comstock is Booker. Or more accurately, they're two versions of the same man. Bro, with Spider-Man at the time last video and this now, I'm like, dude, I've had enough time travel shenanigans for the rest of my fracking life. Years ago, Booker stood before the baptism and faced a choice. In one reality, he rejected it and continued living as Booker DeWitt, but in countless others, he accepted the baptism, reinvented himself as Zachary Hale Comstock, and eventually built Columbia. So, they're the exact same person, their lives simply split apart because of one decision, and that's what makes this so tragic. Years later, Comstock, unable to have kids of his own, crossed into Booker's reality, stole his daughter Anna, and raised her as Elizabeth. So Booker had been chasing the man who stole his daughter without ever realizing he was chasing just himself the whole time. Suddenly, dozens of Elizabeths begin appearing from different timelines.
You were born again as a different man.
Comstock.
It all has to end to have never started, not just in this world, but in all of ours.
They explain that while this Booker chose to walk away from the baptism, countless others made the opposite choice, and that's why killing Comstock will never be enough, because there will always be another one. The only way to truly end the cycle is to stop Booker from ever getting baptized in the first place. With this, all the Elizabeths step forward and start drowning Booker beneath the water. Booker doesn't even fight back, because now he understands the consequences. As he takes his final breaths, one by one the Elizabeths start to fade away as their realities cease to exist. And with that, the absolutely mind-bending story of BioShock Infinite comes to a bitter end. Well, almost. Because if you stick around for the post-credits, there's one final scene where Booker suddenly wakes up back in his messy apartment on the day he originally sold Anna. Panicked, he rushes back toward her bedroom and calls out her name, and just as he opens the door, the screen cuts to black. The game never confirms exactly what happens next, but many fans believe that it hints at, after all the timelines, that one version of Booker finally got a second chance to raise his daughter. And if that's true, that's a really beautiful way to end the story. But we're not done yet, folks, because we've still got the DLC to talk about. We got Clash in the Clouds coming up next, the first DLC released for BioShock Infinite in July of 2013. It focuses entirely on combat, throwing players into a series of challenge arenas where they fight waves of enemies and try to earn the highest score possible. While there's not much story here, the DLC does include a museum area called the Columbian Archaeological Society that unlocks as you progress. Inside, players can find concept art, behind-the-scenes content, and extra lore about Columbia and the development of BioShock Infinite. So while it doesn't move the story forward, it's still a fun bonus for players who enjoyed Infinite's combat and wanted a deeper look at the world Irrational Games created. Next up, we have BioShock Infinite Burial at Sea Episode 1. a story DLC that connects the worlds of BioShock Infinite and the original BioShock in a pretty mind-blowing way, kinda like the Xenoblade games. The story takes place in Rapture on New Year's Eve in 1958, and once again we play as Booker DeWitt, who is now working as a private detective in Rapture when a woman named Elizabeth walks into his office. Now, you and I already know who Elizabeth is at this point, but for some reason, Booker does not seem to recognize her at all. Anywho, Elizabeth asks him to help her find a missing girl named Sally. Booker initially refuses, claiming the girl is dead, but Elizabeth insists otherwise and convinces him to investigate. Together, they begin searching through Rapture for clues, and their investigation eventually leads them to none other than Sander Cohen. And he's still pretty insane even before the fall of Rapture. Anyway, after sneaking their way into one of Cohen's bizarre artistic performances, the pair question him about Sally. Cohen reveals that he knows exactly where she is and agrees to help. In exchange, all he asks for is a dance. After getting what he wants, Cohen points them towards Fontaine's department store, claiming that's where they'll find the girl. However, the store turns out to be far worse than expected. After Andrew Ryan allegedly killed Fontaine and shut down his operations, the entire building was converted into a giant prison to contain Fontaine's followers. Now it's overrun with splicers and filled with people who have completely lost their fracking marbles. As Booker and Elizabeth search the building, they eventually discover that Sally is hiding inside the ventilation system. They spend the next several hours tracking her through the store, sealing vents, and increasing the thermostat temperature to force her out. Eventually, their plan works, and Sally emerges from one of the vents. However, the moment she sees Booker, she panics and refuses to come out.
Come out here right now!
Sally. No.
Yeah, and Mr. Bubbles wastes no time in coming for her rescue. Booker manages to get rid of the Big Daddy and tries again to get Sally out of the burning vent. That's when he realizes that the reason she's acting and looking weird is because she's been converted into a little sister, and this triggers a flood of memories Booker had been suppressing for years. Turns out, this isn't the same Booker DeWitt from BioShock Infinite. In fact, it's Zachary Hale Comstock, or in simpler words, a version of Comstock from another reality who abandoned his prophet persona and left Columbia for Rapture. In the flashback, we revisit the same memory where Booker was trying to take his daughter back from Comstock, only this time we see it from Comstock's POV. And in this particular reality, the tear closes too quickly. So instead of Anna losing her pinky finger, she's tragically decapitated as the portal shuts.
Shut it down!
As the memories return, Comstock is overcome by guilt. He apologizes to Elizabeth for everything he has done.
Elizabeth. Child. I am so sorry.
Before he could say anything else, he is brutally impaled by the Big Daddy's drill and dies right in front of Elizabeth. Aw, man, that's only episode 1? Bro, why can't we just get a solid happy ending in the Infinite games, dude? Now, following the tragic end of episode 1, the story continues with Elizabeth in BioShock Infinite Burial at Sea episode 2. However, things are pretty different than they were last time. Basically, after the Big Daddy killed Comstock in episode 1, he did not spare Elizabeth as well, and she ended up dying in Rapture. But since she exists simultaneously across infinite universes, her death in Rapture only destroys that specific physical manifestation. Meanwhile, a version of her remains alive in the Sea of Doors. Driven by intense remorse for using Sally as bait for her revenge on Comstock, she decides to return to Rapture. The Ludus twins warn her that returning to a timeline where she's already died will collapse her quantum state, meaning she will become immortal and lose all her powers. When Elizabeth insists on going back anyway, she wakes up in Rapture and encounters Atlas, who, as we all know, is actually Frank Fontaine. At this point, Atlas and his men are trapped inside the sunken ruins of Fontaine's department store after Andrew Ryan had the entire building sent to the bottom of the ocean. Elizabeth sees an opportunity to strike a deal with Atlas here. She claims she used to work as Dr. Shu Chong's assistant and knows a way to lift the store back to the surface. It's obviously a lie, but Atlas buys it. In exchange, Elizabeth demands that the Sally be released once the job is done. To make her plan work, Elizabeth begins searching for Dr. Shu Chong's laboratory, all while being accompanied by her subconscious manifestation of Booker, who guides her throughout. Along the way, she uncovers several secrets that directly connect BioShock Infinite to the BioShock 1 and 2 games. She learned that Suchong and Jeremiah Fink from Columbia had secretly been sharing technology across different realities. In fact, many of Columbia's inventions were inspired by Rapture. Vigors were based on plasmids, and even Songbird's design was partially inspired with the tech used to create Big Daddies. Using a trans-dimensional tear in Suchong's clinic, Elizabeth travels to Columbia, where she steals a Ludus particle from the technology responsible for keeping the flying city afloat. After returning to Rapture, she uses it to power Suchong's machine and raise Fontaine's department store from the ocean floor back to the main city level. So it worked out anyway. With Atlas and his men finally free, the deal is technically fulfilled, but Atlas betrays Elizabeth. I mean, what'd you expect from this guy? He captures her and demands information about his ace in the hole, and that's because he thinks Elizabeth works with Suchong. Since Atlas has no access to the information or the trigger phrase Suchong used to create his ace, he assumes Elizabeth would know about it. The problem is, Elizabeth has no idea what he's fracking talking about. He threatens to kill Sally, and in this moment, Elizabeth's subconscious manifestation of Booker helps her piece together the puzzle. She tells Atlas she knows about the ace and will get him the information he needs, so Atlas lets Sally go. For now. Elizabeth then makes her way to Suchong's clinic and witnesses a frustrated Suchong striking a little sister during an experiment. This triggers her nearby Big Daddy, who immediately reacts and drives its drill straight through Suchong, killing him on the spot. And if you remember, we actually found him dead on the table exactly like this in the first game. After Suchong's death, she finally finds the ace in the hole and returns back to Atlas and hands over the envelope, fully aware of what's about to happen. He'll definitely betray her again and most likely kill her, but she doesn't try to stop him, because she also knows that the information she's giving him will eventually lead to his downfall and save Sally. And sure enough, the moment Atlas gets what he wants, he smashes Elizabeth across the head and leaves her bleeding on the floor. But soon after, the fricker realizes he can't read the secret code for the activation phrase and asks Elizabeth what it says.
It says, "Would you kindly?"
Chills, dude! Chills! Oh my gosh! In her final moments, Elizabeth receives one last glimpse of the future. She sees Jack sitting on the airplane using the gun that eventually leads to the crash, and entering Rapture. Most importantly, she sees Sally and the little sisters being rescued by him. Knowing that she made the right choice and her sacrifice will ultimately save Sally, Elizabeth accepts her fate. And with that, the final piece of the BioShock timeline falls into place. Atlas now possesses the phrase needed to control Jack, setting the events of the original BioShock into motion and bringing the entire BioShock saga full circle. All thanks to Elizabeth. If y'all made it this far without exploding your frickin' noggins, congratulations, you're better than me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to lie down in a dark room and process everything I just spent the last few hours explaining. Well, it was like an hour and 20 minutes, but still. Well, for me anyway, it would probably be longer for the video. Anyway, if you want to relive another legendary story with me, click on the next video. And as always, guys, thank y'all for watching. Check out the Spider-Man video. It's one of my favorites.